Cupcake non-conference schedules are becoming the norm everywhere, and James Franklin at Penn State has some thoughts on it just ahead of his game against UMass. I've got some thoughts on it too. Locked On Big Ten starts right now.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Sheeman. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We always appreciate you guys every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Cupcakes are a necessary evil in this day of college football. We'll explain. Plus, the latest Big Ten news and shots fired from the West Coast. Tell you about that. Plus, our Big Ten classics. Be sure to subscribe, little black button below, and follow and share Locked On Big Ten. It's for free wherever you get your podcast. That way you'll get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Look, as a fan, I don't like these non-conference cupcake games. I don't like it when the big boys play the little guys and just crush them 62-7. But it's becoming a necessary evil, and it's not going away anytime soon. You know, Penn State's James Franklin had some time to think this over a little bit. He just had a bye week, had an interesting press conference this week where he covered a lot of interesting things, including playing softer non-conference scheduled games. So, you know, I agree with a lot of what he said, actually, in this press conference. So keep in mind, he's got UMass around the corner, and then after that, he's got Ohio State. So there was some strategy put in all this. And look, he's not alone. I'm not ripping on Penn State for this. More and more schools are doing it. Michigan, for example, they can probably beat anybody in the country. They got to play. They can play the toughest team in the country and the toughest schedule. They can still probably beat everybody. But they've been criticized. They have scheduled lightly in their non-conference games, as a matter of fact. East Carolina, UNLV. UNLV is probably one of the worst football teams in the entire country. Bowling Green, I get it. You don't want any hiccups. You don't want any slip-ups. You don't want any losses. But, you know, Franklin noted a few things that I thought were interesting and worthy of a discussion here on this podcast. You know, he says with playoff expansion and conference expansion both coming, teams are just quickly re-examining their scheduling strategy. That's what he called it, a scheduling strategy. He said Penn State's goal of non-conference scheduling is to go undefeated. That is the goal when they put it together. Now, Penn State has scheduled West Virginia, and they've scheduled Delaware, and they've scheduled UMass, okay? They're also a team like Michigan that could probably beat just about anybody right now. But Franklin quickly points out he's not the only one doing it. He said, look, there's a Big Ten school right now that he says is buying out a ton of previously signed non-conference contracts for future games. And when the conference expands to 18, there's going to be plenty of difficult, high-quality opponents just from the Big Ten on the schedule already. So that these teams are shedding these other teams from their schedule. Now, I will tell you this. I will tell you that Franklin did not mention the school he was talking about specifically, but there are a lot that he can choose from because there are a lot of them are doing it. And we're going to talk about those schools right here. Because, for example, if he was talking about an upper team school like Michigan, in addition to the schedule I just told you, the easy non-conference games this year, and, you know, they don't want any blemishes on their record. They've got national championship hopes, but Michigan, in case you didn't know, has canceled home and home with UCLA recently for 22 and 23. And, of course, now, ironically, UCLA is joining the Big Ten next year. They're going to have to play them anyway, eventually. There's Ohio State. They canceled a home and home with Washington due to the changing college football landscape, quote unquote, is what they say. Now, Washington is joining the Big Ten. Ironically, they're going to have to play them anyway. They're all coming. You can't avoid them. They're coming one way or the other. You could have been talking about a lower tier team like Indiana, for example. They're in the process of canceling a whole bunch of future games with a school like Louisville. Not the best of the best, but a Power 5 school and a school they just played and played them within a touchdown, I might add. They were competitive. They're getting rid of them on the future schedules. They got 2 more games with them. And presumably because they want to find even lesser schools to play. Because, a school, we could talk about Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State all day long and how they manage their schedule because they're all going to try and knock each other off anyway. A school like Indiana or Northwestern, what are you going to do, particularly after expansion takes place in the conference? Indiana's got Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington. Where does it end? I know they're not going to play every one of them every year, but you get the idea. Where's the room for the little guy on this list? Getting rid of divisions and just going to be 1 through 18. Top 2 go at it for the championship. Indiana's not going to be in the top 2. Northwestern's not going to be in the top 2. So they need to find 3 non-conference games that they can win. And then they can hope they can beat their rival Purdue, which is kind of on the same level with them. Okay, there's 4 wins. Now you got to go the rest of the season and try and eke out 2 more wins against the Michigan States and the Rutgers of the Northwesterns to try and get some lower tier mediocre bowl game and survive. That's the strategy. You've got strategy. James Franklin called it strategic scheduling. Whether you're a big boy and you got a lot of big teams that you got to beat and you got to go undefeated or go with 1 loss, or whether you're a lower tier team and you're just trying to get above 500, try to keep your head above water. Either way, whether you're a top feeder or whether you're a bottom feeder, you're still getting the $70 to $100 million a year from the TV deals. But you want to win some football games and have a legitimate football program with all this competition, though. It's pretty tough. Now, let's compare the Big Ten to the SEC for a moment, because Franklin, again, he was on a roll with a lot of good thoughts that I agreed with. He points out that the SEC, they only schedule 8 conference games per year. That allows them to play like a November cupcake before their arch rivals and a little break with an FCS game maybe in November for a lot of these. That's what a lot of them do. Meanwhile, the Big Ten, they schedule 9 conference games. So that allows for 1 less cupcake on the schedule and 1 more chance for a slip up playing a better quality football team. Now, Franklin fully admits that this UMass game coming up, it's on his schedule at this point to give himself a chance to go undefeated at the end of the season. That's what he's trying to do. And with Ohio State, look, this sets up nice for Penn State. They come off a bye. They then play UMass, which is like another bye, and then go right into, after they work on some things and tweak some things, go take on Ohio State. And that's where your season, it's Ohio State and Michigan. And if you knock one of these 2 off, all right, now you can do something. So with that in mind, what's the point of scheduling in a Texas or a North Carolina in there or a Washington? You just be taking added risk and blowing your your entire season. What if Penn State came off this bye and scheduled North Carolina or Clemson? Great for college football. But then they get the loss. Then they go into Ohio State, get another loss. Now you got 2 losses. Now you're in trouble. All those goals that you had up here, now they're kind of down here now. So I see exactly what he's thinking. I don't think this is going to change with college football. Now, some would argue that a stronger schedule could help a team on a bubble. Say in a 4-team playoff, say you're ranked 5th in the nation. You're ranked 6th in the nation. And maybe you got Notre Dame in there or something like that, getting consideration in some year, whatever. Maybe not this year. But then the next thing that people look at is strength of schedule. Well, they played a tougher schedule. They should get the benefit of the doubt. Franklin doesn't buy into that anymore. He used to. But he said back in 2016, for example, he said Penn State was required to play a Power 5 non-conference game, and so he scheduled Pitt. Well, Penn State lost that game 42-39. And Franklin, close competitive game. It's not like he got blown out either. Franklin, and it was at Pitt, if I remember correctly. Franklin would argue that the Nittany Lions would have had a better chance to get into the playoff with an 11-1 record instead of 10-2. Then they went on to win the Big Ten championship, and then they ended up in the Rose Bowl, lost in a shootout to USC. But nevertheless, 11-1 better than 10-2. Obviously, when you're trying to get consideration, he doesn't think they got credit for a tough loss at Pitt by any stretch of the imagination. But give them credit for scheduling it, and also give them credit for scheduling a home and home with Auburn back in 2021 and 2022. Penn State swept that series, by the way, and they became the first Big Ten team to play at Auburn since 1935. That's gutsy. Franklin said there's a reason Big Ten teams don't schedule games like that. But for now, he's decided to take another approach. He's lightening his load. He's not going to be scheduling the Pitts and the Auburns anymore. He's scheduling UMass. And that's a nice, easy break before the big Ohio State game. So I got a couple of thoughts to add to this as well. Once the Big Ten expands to 18 teams, which every year, like 6 to 8 of those 18 are going to be, top 25 teams and powerhouses and a lot of trouble on the schedule for other teams. It will be obviously mathematically more difficult to win the conference for everybody. Everybody. I mean, only one. You got 18. It's going to be pretty tough. Even the really good teams, it's going to be pretty tough. But the playoffs are going to be expanding from 4 to 12 teams. So, and you and I both know that that's going to end up being 16 at some point. There will be 16 teams getting in that. So, with that many spots open, just think about it this way. Theoretically, that means that a Big Ten team could schedule a high-ranking non-conference game here and there for the good of the game if they wanted to. And with 12 or 16 playoff teams, having a loss in the regular season isn't going to be as big of a deal. Now, if you're a Penn State, you want to allow some room for maybe a loss to a Michigan and or Ohio State, and you don't want more than really 2 losses. But you know what? I think you could get 2 losses. If you're in the Big Ten or the SEC and you're the best of the best, once we expand these playoffs, I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be 2-loss teams in those playoffs. And I'm going to also tell you right now, there's going to be a 3-loss team from the Big Ten or the SEC in the college football playoffs once they expand. So it's not the death blow that it used to be. And it just won't be, because they're still going to put the best teams in. And even a 2 or 3-loss team from the Big Ten is better than an undefeated team or maybe a 1-loss team from a lesser conference. So that's how I see it shaking out. And that's how it's going to work out with a 9-game conference schedule. But I still doubt that many of these teams are going to schedule tough non-conference games because of it, because they want to play it safe. They want to allow room for error. Maybe your best player's injured the week you have to take on Michigan, and you're going to lose that game. And so you don't want to be scheduling too many of these tough games. I think this is how it's going to be from now on. We love your opinion on this as we get ready for that Penn State UMass game this weekend. And there'll be others. I'm not picking on Penn State. I am in the flow of this conversation and this strategy, and we're talking about it. It's just the way it's going to be. If you want to hit me up on Twitter at TalkBig10 with the number 10, love to hear from you. Also here on YouTube as well. And I have some new game times coming up for a bunch of 3 different games in the Big Ten on October 21st. Plus some shots fired from out west at the Big Ten and some other news going on at Michigan State. We'll have all that coming up in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. So I want you to snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. It's great. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get into the action than right now. The app's super easy, a lot of fun things to do, whether you like the point spreads, money line, over-unders, props, all that stuff right there. It's a bunch of fun. It's at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the rest of the NFL season for you and get in on the action. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So some game time changes coming up. in a couple of weeks, October 21st. The Penn State-Ohio State game that we alluded to, that's going to be the big noon game on Fox, October 21st. So that's a 12 o'clock game at Ohio State. Nebraska's football game versus Northwestern on that date will kick off at 3:30 on the Big Ten Network. And the Michigan State game on that day, October 21st, will be a night game, 7:30 kickoff on NBC and Peacock. And this is the first time that Michigan and Michigan State have played at night at Spartan Stadium. So that ought to be a lot of fun. Speaking of Michigan State, interim head coach Harlan Barnett, Michigan State running back, he says Michigan State running back Jordan Simmons is entering the transfer portal and is no longer with the team. A couple of reasons that's interesting. First of all, apparently he went home over the bye week, talked it over with the family, decided time to leave. Now, remember, what's the guy leaving in the middle of the season for? The recent firing of Mel Tucker is why. Remember, if your coach leaves, moves on to another job, gets fired, he was fired on September 27th. This opens up the portal for you for 30 days. Anybody can, without penalty, you can transfer. And so that is in effect here. And the other interesting thing was Simmons used to be the leading rusher on this football team. His freshman year, he killed it. It was great. But his role has been reduced since then. He's only played in 4 games this year. So you know what that means. He can also use the rest of this year as a redshirt year. It's like this year didn't even happen. He can go transfer somewhere else. He's got 2 more years of eligibility. He'll be in good shape. So we wish him well on that. That also brings the number to 3 players that have left the roster since the Tucker firing. I was kind of curious to see how that was going to go. Once he was fired and a lot of those guys were recruited by Tucker, I kind of wondered if there'd be some sort of mass exodus, like a lot of players, like a half dozen or a dozen, but it's been 3. So that's modest. I think it would be best case scenario, really, if you think about it. Also, more Michigan State news. There may be a quarterback change for the Spartans this weekend versus Rutgers. Noah Kim has struggled, been a little banged up too. Caton Hauser and Sam Levitt are there. They're up for consideration. Barnett says he will not make a QB1 announcement until Saturday. Mel Tucker did the same thing. Went all summer long, and he said, you'll find out who the starting quarterback is when we take the field for the first time for that first game of the season. As it turned out, it was Noah Kim at the time. But nevertheless, that's how it's going to roll this weekend. We'll find out. Nebraska starting wide receiver Marcus Washington is out for the season with a torn ACL. He injured his knee on Friday night in the Huskers' win over Illinois. He just made the second longest catch of his career for 39 yards on the previous play before the injury, so that was kind of sad. And shots fired from Washington. The new AD at Washington, Troy Dannon, less than a year before joining the Big Ten, told a Seattle radio station that big budgets don't win championships, but people do. And then he went deeper. He said if budgets won championships, Ohio State and Texas would win everything. And they haven't won much lately. And I got to tell you, I don't think taking a shot at the Buckeyes is wise at this point. But, hey, welcome to the league. Welcome to the league. Should be fun. A couple of reminders here. On Friday on this channel and all the other Locked On College channels, we got our Locked On College Football Kickoff live show, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. It's live on this channel, all the other Locked On channels as well. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day. Meanwhile, please subscribe down below and also share and follow and like Locked On Big Ten. Coming up next, just a minute, our weekly feature, our Big Ten Classics. It's all coming up right here on Locked On Big Ten. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for the right team, your team, faster and for free. You post a job, you got the purple hashtag hiring frame and your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring, and everybody sees it. Get a bunch of great candidates, simple tools. I got screening questions that make it easy to focus on just the right candidates that you want. And those with the right experience, you can quickly prioritize everybody and interview the person you want to hire. So it's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, so let's do it. At this time of week, we always like to look ahead to the weekend a little bit and go ahead and check out Big Ten Classics on the Big Ten Network. I'm a big fan, and at this time of year, we also add in the games that they're showing live, so you know what's going on. I'm going to put it up here on screen so that you can see it. And we started off with Friday the 13th. This Friday, 11 a.m. These are all Eastern times. The Ohio State Football Classic 2012, Purdue at Ohio State. This is where Kenny Guyton relieved Braxton Miller to lead touchdown drives in the final minute and overtime for the Buckeyes win. Also, at 1 o'clock, the Wisconsin Football Classic, the Heartland Trophy up for grabs in 2019, Iowa, Wisconsin. This is the one where Jonathan Taylor rushed 31 times for 250 yards. And this game had almost 800 yards of total offense. And despite Iowa outscoring Wisconsin 16-3 in the fourth quarter, the Badgers won the game 24-22. Then at 2 o'clock, we got the Maryland Football Classic. This is 2018 Illinois at Maryland. Javon Leake scoring on a 97-yard kickoff return, rushing for 3 touchdowns, and Maryland wins 63-33. Hope you had the over. 63-33. Take the over on that. Then on Saturday, October 14th at 10 a.m., we got the Big Ten tailgate coming from Rutgers. And then that goes right into the Michigan State-Rutgers game at 12 o'clock. Also at 3:30, more college football, that UMass Penn State game we were talking about. And then on Sunday, October 15th, at noon, we got the Big Ten Football in 60 feature. That's where they take the highlights of a game, chop it up, snap-by-snap highlight, all in 60 minutes. The Indiana at Michigan game. New offensive coordinator for Indiana at the Big House against that #1 defense. We'll see how that turned out. And then at 3 o'clock, women's college basketball, DePaul at Iowa. The crossover at Kinnick. It's a charity exhibition. And Caitlin Clark. Nobody can get enough of Caitlin Clark. What an awesome basketball player she is. 7 o'clock, Big Ten football at 60. It is Iowa at Wisconsin. All the highlights from that game. So there you have it. That is a look at what's coming up this weekend. A lot of exciting stuff, both classics and live football for sure. All right. Many ways for you to interact with me. Love to hear from you. Again, at Twitter, at TalkBig10, number 10. The website, TalkBig10 with the number 10, TalkBig10.com. And also comments here on YouTube. Love to hear from you. Be sure to subscribe, the black button below, and follow this podcast and share it. Asking you to share it as well with all of your friends or Big Ten people that you know. And this is all on your favorite podcast app where you get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Now I'm going to ask you to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast for the latest on everything else going on in sports. Have yourself a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm Craig Sheeman for Locked On Big Ten.